Is a community participation event. Let me begin this morning by choosing a few volunteers to help me preach this sermon. You ought to see this. You know, it's... People look up, they're looking at the walls, they're melting into the pews. You know, the one thing they aren't right now is asleep. Isn't that interesting? There are even a few of them saying, "Choose me, choose me, choose me." How did you feel? How did you feel when I said that? How did you feel when I walked down the aisle and got close to you? You know, you guys, maybe I should come over here. I'm not done. I don't want you to not feel the same thing. How did you feel? Was there something in you that maybe wanted to come but didn't, maybe wanted to help but was afraid to, maybe thought, "Oh no, he might choose me"? There's anxiety, there's worried, I might be embarrassed, people might think differently, I might not have the skills to do it, they might videotape it with a camera and put it on YouTube. I mean, there's all kinds of feelings that people have. Am I right? It was like when you were a kid and they chose teams, right? Didn't you just hate that? Well, I did, because I just didn't like it. I remember once in seminary, I had a professor who will go unnamed because the pedagogical style is not something I would encourage. But we had written a paper, church history. We'd written a paper and turned it in, and he came in on one occasion. He came in with some of the papers, and he looked at the class, and he said, "I've read these papers, and these are possibly the worst papers I have ever read. How are you feeling?" Then he proceeded to walk down the aisle and pass them out. It's like the death angel going over. I'm sorry if I caused some of you that same anxiety. What's the point? Well, the point is, this morning and in the weeks to come, during the season of Epiphany, the scriptural texts that are selected for us are about Jesus calling his disciples. Jesus being called and Jesus calling his disciples. Jesus naming and claiming those who would be closest to him in the days and weeks, months, and years to come. And as we read these stories, our first inclination, partially because of how they've been written and partially because of the years of tradition that have been layered upon them, our first inclination is to think that when these disciples were called, they just were ecstatic. They dropped their nets and they followed him. "Choose me, choose me." You know, that's kind of how it's portrayed, either in the Gospels or by the church. That they left family, they left friends, they left work, and they just with abandon followed him. And yet we know that in that time, the tradition was to follow the rabbis. You went with them for a while, then you went home and took care of your family, and you went with them. And so it was not, as we might think, just an abandon and leave. And even Jesus stayed with friends and was not on the road all the time. But the interpretation that we, or at least I, have always been left with is that somehow they just jumped up and down at the opportunity to leave and to risk everything in order to follow him, whom they had just met. Whom, as you read on, Nathanael says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth? What, are you crazy?" You see, they didn't understand him then, and they didn't understand him later on. They had, my point is, they had, I am sure, the same angst, the same feelings of what if, what will happen, who is this, is it worth it? The same feelings we had, maybe even more, in the selection process. And there were probably some that we didn't read about who turned and walked away, who buried their heads, who melted into the pews. So you see, there's a part of us that would like to be chosen in this gospel story, and then there's a part of us that would rather not. Because, as I said with the children, if you're selected to be on a team, that's all good and great, but what happens when you're on? There are obligations, there are responsibilities, there are performance issues. Stuff we could lose if we take the risk. And so, most of us would rather not. Have you ever noticed how many sayings we have and how many times in the course of the day we say or someone says to us, be safe? People say that to you? Be safe? Be careful. Don't, what do they say? Take care. You ever say that to people? Take care? Somebody says that to you, take care? We live in a society, that promotes that. After all, that's why we take out all the insurance policies we do. That's why we sue people when we don't think their products protected us enough. We want to be a risk-free society, and we become upset when we think we've been wronged or we are not. And yet, really, maybe what we should say to people is not take care, but take a risk. Take a risk today. Take a chance. Be bold. Martin Luther said that if you are going to sin, sin boldly. If you're going to make a mistake, give them a good one. I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who said, if you never want anybody to criticize you or make fun of you, do nothing. Take a chance. Be bold. After all, nothing ventured. Oh, you know it. How easy it is to know, how hard it is to do. You see, my theology holds that the decision just wasn't that easy for the disciples. And I can say that because I don't think the decision was all that easy for Jesus. Otherwise, why are we told that immediately following his decision to be baptized, he is driven by the Spirit into the wilderness? And what waits him in the wilderness? Demons. Demons. The struggle with greed, the struggle with pride, the struggle to be somebody, the struggle to rule the world. Demons. It pushes him out there to say, yes, he has to risk his very being to follow God. And there's other times when it's difficult for him as well. He turns to Peter at one point and he says, get behind me, Satan. And in the Garden of Gethsemane, we are told his sweat turns to blood, which is a way of saying he was in desperate, desperate struggle. You see? And if there were continued moments like this for him, I am sure the disciples had the same. You see, submitting yourself to the guidance or to the influence of someone else is never easy. We would rather have it all under our control. Going down into the waters is scary because they're deep. Nothing, my biggest phobia is water. Going down into the water and having, some people thrive on that, but you go down into the water, it's deep. But the scriptures say that it's only in the depths that the adventure begins. We live superficially. It's only in the depths that the adventure begins. When we go down, we come up different. And it's then that we hear, you are my beloved, a named and claimed child of God. Wow. Wow. Think about it from another perspective. Economy struggles, right? Economy struggles. Why do economists tell us that the economy struggles these days? Because banks aren't willing to invest. Companies aren't willing to expand employment. Why? Because it's risky. To invest, to gamble, is to take a risk. And when we don't take the risk, what happens corporately and individually to all of us? It all contracts. It all begins to suffocate. There's this cloud that hangs over us. And until we break through that, we never get to new space and a new place. When we contract, when we don't invest, when we don't take risks, things get glum, they get tight, the expectation, the anticipation, the hope, and the joy of living dies. People say you shouldn't gamble, but I would submit to you that every day we do. Have you ever driven up or down Gulf Boulevard in the winter? Those of you who are new, watch the corner up by Santa's gift shop, because people in the right lane invariably will want to make a left turn 3 lanes over. It is a major risk. Living entails risk. We would like to think we can eliminate it, but we can't. Sometimes I wonder, and some of you can sympathize with me. How did we ever live to be adults, given the cribs that we grew up in? Or the toys we stuck in our mouths? I don't know. But, we've tried to eliminate it and think we can, but risk is there. And I would ask you, there's risk in life, but if you are called to do something by God, is it really a risk? Is it really a gamble? Or is it a matter of faith? And so what I want to do this morning, I want to conclude my thoughts by asking you to engage in one more experiment with me. One more experiment. I want you to pause right now, and I want you to go into your mind. I want you to pause, and I want to ask yourself this question. I want to ask yourself, is there a time in my life, your life, is there a time in my life, an experience, an opportunity, an event where I can say, I wish I had. I wish I had. If you don't have any event like that, congratulations. You are a better person than me. But if you can name them, why not work on eliminating them in the future? You can't do anything about the past, woulda, shoulda, coulda. But you can make a commitment and a change today. Scriptures say, believe in God, believe also in me, believe in yourself. Believe that God is still speaking, that God still speaks to the world, that God still speaks to the church, that God still speaks to you, and this God says, come follow me. Calling you from wherever you are, whoever you are in life, to reinvest yourself in the ministries of life. Saying yes when you hear the calling rather than oh no to God. It is the poet who writes, come to the edge. Oh no, it's steep. Come to the edge. Oh no, I might fall. And the poet concludes by saying, come to the edge, and I did. And I flew. May the same be true for you. Amen.